Never quit, right? It's one of the biggest and most pervasive, I'll call it, myths in the entrepreneurial space when we talk about grind culture and hustle culture and continuing to push and all of these things. In my life, what I found is some of the most successful moments and some of the biggest changes and most positive changes that I've experienced happen when I quit. And today I want to help you rethink that. And I want to point out some of the warning signs of when it may be time for you to quit, or we'll call it pivot, and talk about some of the pain points that can happen when you hold on a little bit too long because you don't quit, you don't make that change. And I want to talk about the benefits that can come on the other side if you do make the hard decision and you quit, you pivot. My name is Patrick Menefee and I'm a mindset and success coach. And my goal in this channel and in all of my businesses is to help you live a more intentional, fulfilled, and successful life. Now, these videos come out every single Monday, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified when the next one comes out. And if you want more, you can subscribe to my newsletter. The link is in the description below. Now, if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to go back to last week's video because I talk about some of the nuance between when it is right to quit and when it is right to push through, and some of the logic behind that. But today I want to dive into these very specific points, and I'm going to share a couple of examples from my own life that relates to each one of these. And the first thing that I want to address is, what are some of the warning signs? The first one that comes to mind, and this is what I experienced in one of my businesses a couple of years ago, is just a pure lack of results and a lack of any success whatsoever. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This is anytime you run into a roadblock and you aren't achieving the success that you want, are you saying I should quit? And no, absolutely not. That's not the point. There's a very big difference between hitting a roadblock that you need to overcome and running into a brick wall because you're running in the wrong direction. In my current business, in my coaching business, and as I'm building out Chartered Entrepreneurs, there are roadblocks right now. I'm not seeing the level of success that I know is possible, and I know that I can push through because it's a matter of figuring some things out. But in a previous business, when I was flipping houses and when I was trying to build this massive house flipping business, I wasn't seeing the success that I wanted because I was in the wrong space. I was doing something that I wasn't passionate about, something that I didn't care about, and something that I didn't know the lane that I was in very well, and I needed to make a change. Now, a smaller version of that change may have been fully changing the way that I do business and putting more people in place. My version of it was I needed to shut down the business because the business wasn't the right thing. So a lack of success in a lot of ways is tied to the second warning sign, which is a lack of interest in the work that you're doing. A lot of times this goes back to some of the identity pieces that I've talked about before, where we're doing something because we feel like we're supposed to do it, not because it's what we actually want. For me, I didn't love the work that I was doing. I didn't love the business that I was building. It didn't light me up. It didn't inspire me whatsoever. I didn't care about it. That ties to the third warning sign, which is that it's not aligned with where you're trying to go long term. For me, as I was building this flipping business, I had my wake up call when a coach looked at me and said, as I'm talking about the impact that I want to make on the world and I'm talking about where I want to be in 10, 15, 20 years, he looks at me and he says, Patrick, what are you doing flipping houses? How does that help anybody the way that you want to help people? This wasn't aligned with where I was trying to go. I didn't like the work, and as a result, I wasn't seeing the success that I cared about, all because I was in the wrong space and I needed to make a change. I needed to pivot, and I needed to, what most people would call, quit. And that was ultimately what I ended up doing. Now, the dangers of holding on, this is where it gets a little bit stickier. This is where it gets emotional. This is where it gets raw. This is where you start to face the fear of what happens if you do pivot. What are people going to think? In some cases, this fear of letting go and of quitting and of pivoting can lead to emotional decisions that are not right for you. They're not right for anybody involved. For me in my flipping business, I made a decision to pursue a deal because the team needed a win. I needed to get someone moving forward. I needed to get them excited about something. And so I bought a deal that was a terrible deal that by any other means I never would have bought. But I bought it anyway because I wanted to keep things going and I didn't want to quit. And I thought if I could just hold on to this one deal and I can make something work, it'll turn things around and I won't need to pivot. I'm not in the wrong spot if I make this deal happen. I was still in the wrong spot. I just made a bad decision. Now, where it gets a little bit more real and where I'm going to get really, really raw with you for a minute is a lot of times holding on and the fear associated with not letting go, it hurts the people that you're trying to help more than it actually helps them. I'm going to pivot away from business for a second and share an example with you from my personal life. Back in my early 20s, I got engaged. It was shortly after my mom died, and it was a very transitional and interesting time in my life. I'd just gone on active duty in the Army. And I felt like the next step and the right thing for me to do was to propose, which obviously looking back is a terrible reason to do that. There was no reason to quit. There was no reason to break up. There was nothing that was bad that said I shouldn't do this. As a result, rather than contemplating any type of pivot, I just kept going down the path that I thought I was supposed to go down. And I thought that was going to be best because it wasn't going to hurt her. I wasn't going to rip the rug out and surprise her by either breaking up with her or not wanting to get married. I thought that that was going to be something that was going to help. Again, in hindsight, Obviously, that doesn't really make sense. So instead, I proposed, we got engaged, and a few months later, as I was out at a training exercise in California for the Army, I had no phone, no contact with anybody for 2.5 weeks, almost 3 weeks. And through that time, I had a lot of time. I was very early in my Army career and I didn't have a job really. And so I just had a ton of time to myself to just think, and I didn't have a phone to get distracted with. Halfway through, I realized that I couldn't get married. It wasn't the right decision. I was too young. I wasn't ready for it. None of it was right. I didn't need to make that decision. And so what I had to do was I had to end it. I had to change that. But the problem was I wasn't going to see her for another month. I wasn't going to, at least. It was going to be a few weeks before I was even able to talk to her. And then another few weeks until I was going to be back in Kansas. And then she lived in Iowa, and it was going to be even longer before I was going to get back together with her. And so this decision that I made to try to keep things calm and peaceful and to not hurt her turned into me breaking up with her from a Humvee over the phone, ending an engagement, not breaking up with her, from 2,000 miles away. And it was, for me, it was I felt terrible and it was miserable, but I know that it was terrible for her. I totally blindsided her. And in the long run, by not pivoting, by not quitting, by not making the decision early on, by not making the hard choice early on, and by being fearful of what it would mean to let go, the person that I was trying not to hurt by doing that ended up getting hurt way more. And the same thing applied in my business. When I finally shut down the business, I had strung them along longer than I needed to, but I was fearful of letting go. And I thought that by easing them in and by just kind of saying, okay, we'll try, that it was going to make things better. When in reality, it was time to change. It was time to pivot. And ultimately, the problem with all of this is that it keeps you from your actual meaningful goal, whether it's in business, and it keeps you from, like for me now in the coaching space and with Charlotte entrepreneurs, this is where I know I'm supposed to be. By staying on this path and not quitting and not pivoting, it prevented me from getting here. Now that I was able to pivot, I was able to move and I was able to get here. Same thing in my relationship. I now have a beautiful wife and daughter, and I'm so happy and love where I'm at. And I was ready for it when I stepped into the relationship and stepped into all of this. I wasn't ready back then. If I had kept going down the path that I was going down, I would not be obviously where I am today. If I had kept the business, I wouldn't be in the business that I'm in today. If I had kept the relationship, I wouldn't be in the relationship that I'm in right now. All of these things, by pivoting, by quitting, and by moving away, I was able to move into something that was right for me. And it doesn't make it easy. It absolutely was not easy. It took me so long to pivot away from the flipping business. I was more comfortable pursuing a path that was going to take me towards bankruptcy than I was pivoting and quitting, because that was what was ingrained in me, and that's what I thought, and that's why I thought quitting was so terrible and why I couldn't do it. And in the relationship, I made the decision to get engaged, and I kept all of these things going when I really shouldn't have. And leaving that, pivoting away from that, quitting all of that was hard. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I know it was even worse for her. It was worth it though. It was the right decision, because without that, I wouldn't be married to Jamie and I wouldn't have my beautiful daughter. If it weren't for quitting the flipping business, I would not have the coaching business that I have now. I wouldn't have Charlotte Entrepreneurs. I wouldn't be doing something that is meaningful to me, something that lights me up and something that really propels me to move forward each and every day. That's the benefit. You gain this clarity when you pivot away. It doesn't mean that you're going to find the answer right away. In the business in particular, it took me another year after I pivoted away from the flipping business to figure out where I was meant to be, to dive fully into and commit to the coaching business and to dive into Charlotte Entrepreneurs. It took a long time to get there. It took a lot of work, but it is 100% worth it, because it was the right decision to make. Because I needed to quit. I needed to pivot. I needed to shift away from where I was going. So where do you need to quit? So my encouragement to you in all of this, just think about it a little bit differently. We hold on so tight, like the guy in the meme that's holding onto the vine where he needs to just let go and set his feet on the ground. Instead, he's tearing up his arms. We need to just let go sometimes. So what are the things that you're just holding on to for the sake of holding on because you're afraid of quitting? I encourage you to think about it a little bit. We'll talk more about these in future videos too. Again, go check out the video from last week where I talk about where it is good to quit and talk about some of the nuances there. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can check out these videos every week. If these stories resonate with you and if you take a lot from this and you can learn from this, I encourage you to subscribe to the newsletter. I send out stories like this. It comes in your inbox every other week, and it's a great way to learn from my own experiences and take the lessons that I learned from them and apply them to your own life. So I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you back here next week.